A Swift Kick in the Ass, Episode 30.
Welcome to a Swift Kick in the Ass podcast, hosted by lifelong friends Tom Stewart and John Curren. Today's episode is a special feature covering Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong friend John Curren. And today we're talking about Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, Law 17. And we'll jump right into 17, John. It's going to be keep others in suspended terror, cultivate an air of unpredictability. Humans are creatures of habit with an insatiable need to see familiarity in people's actions. Your predictability gives them a sense of control. Turn the tables. Be deliberately unpredictable. Behavior that seems to have no consistency or purpose will keep them off balance, and they will wear themselves out trying to explain your moves. Taken to extreme, this strategy can intimidate and even terrorize. What do you think?
Well, isn't that the day or the time in which we live? I mean, since 9/11, the world has changed.
Yes.
Well, actually, I don't know if the world has changed, but our view of the world has definitely changed.
Right.
But this goes beyond. I mean, this law has been at work for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it often makes me wonder. I don't want this to be about the terrorist attack and everything, but I have to wonder if those terrorists really, how much they really knew about us. And I think that, and what I mean by that is, how predictable are we as a country? Did they predict how we would react? And, were they right or wrong? From a risk management perspective, you try to calculate risk. You try to look at situations and either good or bad, and try to calculate risk and determine how predictable they are. I mean, the more predictable they are, the better you can calculate the risk of taking certain actions. So this is about control. It is about decisions, and I think it's about a question of whether it's better to be on the offensive or the defensive, because, like it says in the beginning, most people are they have an insatiable need for familiarity. They want they are against change. They don't want things to be different, and that's where they're more comfortable. And they think if they just kind of go along life and just take it as it comes, they're going to be fine. No one's going to really bother them. But I think it's just the opposite happens. If you're always on the defensive, you never have a chance to strike out on your own and take the offensive.
I agree. In fact, I was unpredictable. I just got up and grabbed a pillow in the middle of our podcast, and because my ass was hurting. But
it was like I saw you leave, and I was like, "What the hell?"
I wasn't going to start just shouting randomly, like Scatman Blue, and you'll be like, "What the hell? I'm being unpredictable." But I use this quite a bit. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, sometimes you get someone that you just, they're bigger and stronger, or they just dominate you, and you're like, what can I do to compete against this person? And being unpredictable is a good strategy because it throws their game off. And so it definitely has a real world application other than just fighting, but for business, marketing, life.
Yeah, I think if first of all, I think if you're 100% predictable, you're very, very, very boring, because everyone knows exactly what you're going to do. And if someone is looking, we're talking about power here, and in the game of power, you are looking to take everything you can and leverage it to your advantage, and that means preying on people's weaknesses. And how else do you know their weaknesses? If if they're predictable, you can read their weaknesses very easily and you can play on them. So I've done exactly the same thing in business life and personal life. I think being slightly unpredictable makes you dangerous, and people don't. That's a defense, really, because it's a passive defense. Because if people think you're unpredictable and they think you're dangerous, they're not going to mess with you.
True. You know, I don't mean to keep on bringing it back to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it applies so well. And, you know, I've been training for 6 years with my wife and my family. And so I've been fighting with my wife ever since then. And you think, yeah, a guy is going to be able to dominate a woman. But, you know, if you're close in strength and weight, you're not going to, it's going to be an equal match because her skills are just as good as mine, if not better. And we had Robson Moura, who is like 10-time world champion. He's a very good, well-known Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach. And he happened to come to our school. And so he was there that night, and we were like, you know, let's, me and my wife went to go roll, and we're like, all right, let's, you know, you kind of get that energy in the room because there's a lot of guys and girls there, and it's, you know, Robson Moura's watching. So it turned out that it was just me and my wife on the mat fighting. So everyone is watching us. Well, don't you know, we are not unpredictable because we know each other's game. And every time she'd throw me in her guard, I couldn't get out. She couldn't sweep me. She couldn't submit me. You know, it's like it was like at the end, she goes, that was the most boring roll ever. You know, here she is wanting to, impress this jiu-jitsu black belt. And it was just like, it looked like we weren't even doing anything because we kept on countering each other's moves because we were being too predictable.
Yeah. You know, in the chapter of this law, they discuss chess a lot and how life is really a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it mimics life. So I kept on thinking, do you want to be a pawn on the chessboard, or do you want to be a king? And then that made me think, wait a minute, maybe I want to be a queen instead, which sounds kind of funny, but in chess, the king is limited to one movement, you know, one place
right
at a time. They're very limited in where they can move, whereas the queen can basically go in any direction as often as she wants. She basically can run the board.
Are you trying to tell me something, John?
Well, no.
No, I agree.
We're talking about chess.
She is the most interesting chess piece by far, other than the knight. I think the knight's pretty cool just because they can move and
can jump over things.
Right, and they move they can move like no one else can, even the queen.
You know, and you know, if we compare ourselves to chess, certainly we are all predictable in one way or another. But it's when you're unpredictable that people view you differently. You don't get walked over. I recognize this at work, that when you're willing to speak up and stand up for yourself, the work bullies tend to back down really fast.
Yes.
They don't push you as hard. So sometimes it's good to be on the defense. I mean, on the offensive. And going back, you know, in my own life experience, I was almost married once, and I almost married the wrong girl. We'll talk about that more and more over time, I guess. But I remember going through arbitration. We weren't married, but in the state of Georgia, if you live together in the same apartment, your names are on the lease. After 1 year, back at that time, you were considered to be common law marriage.
Oof.
So it was basically like a divorce. I called off the wedding about 2.5 weeks before, which in and of itself was unpredictable, because I think most people would go ahead and just say, yeah, I made a commitment. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit jittery about getting married, but they go through with it. And then what happens? It ends up in divorce, and sometimes there are children involved too, which is a shame in my case. I mean, and from my opinion, but I can understand how that happens. And, you know, but for me, I knew if I married this woman, two things were going to happen. One person would be in jail and the other person would be dead over a period of time. Wasn't sure who. So for me, it was the right decision to get the hell out of there. So we're in this at the courthouse in a meeting room. The judge instructed us to kind of work things out and go through arbitration, come up with a list of what she wanted, what I wanted. And in the negotiations, she wanted me to, pay her rent for like 2 years or something like that. We had just signed a new lease. And, I didn't have that kind of money. It was a lot of money. And my dad was with me and he said, come on, we need to go outside and talk this over for a minute. And we walked outside. He said, Johnny, he said, when they talk about the apartment rent, you tell them that it's a 2-bedroom apartment and that you will live in one of the bedrooms and she will live in the other. And you'll continue to pay the half rent until the lease is over. And then you can go your separate ways. And I was like, Dad, I don't want to live with this woman. I'd have to like lock my door and I'd be living in constant fear of things being cut off in the middle
John
of the
Wayne
night.
Bobbitt.
Yeah. It was not something I wanted to do at all. And he said, Johnny, I know this. I know you don't want to do this, but just follow my advice and see how this plays out. So when they brought it up, I said, no, I'm not going to move out. I'm going to move into the second bedroom. She can take the first bedroom. I'll continue paying my rent. And I still remember the look in their eyes of disbelief. They're like, just in shock. They're like, no, we don't think that's right. And it was just a negotiation ploy more than anything like that. I didn't want to, but I caught them off guard. And that is what this law is really all about. It's when you're in an adversarial type of place, if you're dealing with an enemy, being unpredictable can really be in your favor.
Absolutely.
And in that case, it did. It really was a smokescreen, and it led them to believe that I was willing to do something I really wasn't, but they didn't know. And still cost me a ton of money, but it was worth it.
So what did you learn? You don't go steady with anyone in Georgia.
No, not her, at least.
No, that's a crazy law, man. That's scary. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they changed it. They changed it, but yeah, that is scary. And
yeah, because if you realize someone's not right for you, you should be allowed to. It's a free country. You leave. You shouldn't have to be indebted to treat them like you were actually married.
But as I think more, and then I look back on my life, I notice how I have used predictability to my favor. When I was in 8th grade, I went to a different middle school than I had for 6th and 7th. So I was the new kid, and in 8th grade, I was very short. I had big feet and big hands, but I was very awkward and very clumsy and very skinny. And even though I was in 8th grade, the 6th grader came up to try and started picking on me at lunch. And I was out in the courtyard at lunch, and this kid is picking on me, and he's saying like things like, "What'd you say about my mother?" Stupid kid stuff.
Right.
And I didn't even know the kid. He just wanted to pick a fight. So I was doing my best to try to get out of it, and he started poking me in the stomach with his fingers, and I hated that. And I was like, but I could tolerate it. And I kept on saying, I don't want to fight you. And then he came up and he would touch my face, like that. And I really hated that. But I kept my cool. And I just kept on saying, dude, I don't want to fight you. And then I made up a decision in my mind that if that kid touched my face one more time, all bets were off. I was going to beat his butt. And at that moment, I thought that, he went and he poked my stomach. And I remember thinking at that time, and it's so funny because that was so many years ago, but I remember thinking, he didn't poke my face. I'm not going to fight him. And now, as I thought that, I saw his hand coming up towards my face, and I clobbered him. Right? I mean, it was just instinct. Boom! And I whacked him like in the jaw, and I didn't stop. I just started pounding him. I beat the shit out of him, and he was crawling under my legs. And I was not acting predictably. I mean, he was predicting that I was going to sit there and I was going to take it and I was going to be a wimp. But little did he know, here I was, being quiet, but quietly calculating my strategy to get out of that situation. And I think in our lives, we all have situations that we want to get out of, and we really need to think long and hard about a strategy on how to deal with that. And in some cases, being unpredictable can get you out and get you to win.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned a schoolyard thing, because I had a similar instance with, I think I was in 10th grade, and I was riding a bus, and there was these ninth graders, and these girls were just like the mean girls, and they were in the back of the bus, and they were picking on this one kid who just had no social skills, no ability to defend himself, and just like really, really picking on him to the point where, I think he ended up spitting on the girl, right? And then she just started beating the crap out of him, right? Because and being like really harsh about it. So I finally got sick of it. I stood up and I was like, I yelled at the top of my lungs, "Stop it!" And all of a sudden they just froze. And all of a sudden the girl goes, "What are you gonna do about it?" And I'm like, "I'm not gonna punch this girl. I'm not gonna get in a fight with a girl." So I looked at her and I gave her like this, like this Joker laugh, and she goes, That kid's crazy. And she instantly stopped. And after that, man, the kid that I defended was like the most loyal guy ever. I mean, he was like, thank you, and she never bothered him again, never said anything to me. It was just, I didn't, I had to think on my feet, and I was like, man, what do I do? And that was the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. And that's, and I think that's amazing. She didn't know what you're going to do. And let's just face it, a smile is one of the most disarming things you can imagine, but laughing like the Joker, that just knocks it up. I mean, that knocks it out of the ballpark. And I forget, there was a comedian, I think, who had that built into one of his skits. He's just like, you start twitching, and if people start fighting, you start like twitching and like starting like you're possessed. And
yeah, you never fight a crazy person, man.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. There is a comedian. It's not about fighting, but it's hilarious. I thought Russell Brand, live in New York. I don't know how old this is. This is way before he started getting involved in political discussions, but he was talking about how a lot of women thought he was gay, and he says, he's like, I would just play along. I'm not gay. I'm British. I just, I just play along like I'm gay, and then boom, pregnant, boom, pregnant, boom, pregnant. I don't know. I thought it was funny. It was better with the with his body movements and the body pumps when he did that. But it plays into what we're talking about, because they were thinking it was gay, and thinking they were safe, but they really weren't. So
I was listening to a story about Genghis Khan and the people that lived on the steppe border that was like right outside of China, and how they would trick their enemies, because basically they were horse archers. That was like their main thing. Yeah, they had swords and stuff, but their main thing was, they rode horses, almost like Indians. When they went into battle, each guy had like, and women, because their women were fighters too. Each person would have like maybe 10 horses with them. So that way they called them remounts. So in case the one horse got, shot with an arrow or killed or cut, whatever, they just jump onto another one. And one thing about these horse archers is they would trick their enemies. They had basically a troop of actors that would go and they would engage the enemy, and all of a sudden they would act like they're getting beaten, and they'd get real scared and they'd run away. And of course, it's a natural, the thing for the other armies were to pursue them. So as soon as they pursued them, they would go right into a trap and they would have an ambush. And then the rest of the archers would just, annihilate that army. And that's one of the strategies that Genghis Khan used to conquer China.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And they failed because they were so predictable, knew exactly what they were doing.
Yep.
Bring that into modern times. We all, we started out this episode talking about terrorism and the effects of 9/11 on our country. And now 15, is it 15 years now? I know that people's bumper stickers on their cars are looking a little bit worn, saying we will never forget.
Oh, for 9/11?
Yeah, for 9/11. But, our country has gone through one of the largest, the biggest recession that we've ever faced, the Great Recession, which in some regards just blows the Great Depression out of the water. So much worse in many cases. But, look at how people have responded and to that economic conditions and the changes our country and our perception of the world have, they've taken a toll on us. We're changing the way we live. And I look at like the tiny house movement and simple living. And I think, and libertarianism, I think that scares a lot of people just because it seems so unpredictable. It's not within the social norms. And Tommy, I know you and I discuss a lot about disrupting social convention, meaning that we think that a lot of what society believes isn't necessarily true. It's a trap. We get up in the morning, we work all day, we go to work, we have a long commute home, we spend an hour with our kids before they go to bed, you go to school, and blah 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 blah. That's the norm our society is used to. It's predictable.
Well, it came out of the industrial age. Even from what I understand is schools were created not so forth to educate the people to make them smarter. It was to make them better employees, and teach them a regiment, then that's, it's just that we're still, even though we're beyond that age and going into the, a new millennium, and it's just, we're still stuck in those ways because that's what our fathers did. That's what our grandfathers did and great grandfathers before them.
Yeah. And people like comfort. They like to know what to expect. They want things to be predictable. But the fact is that it's not necessarily always in our best interest to be predictable. If you're looking to build power and respect and honor, as a lot of other things too, I think come out of this, you have to think differently. You have to be willing to go on the offensive and be unpredictable and do things that serve your interests. Not saying go out and hurt anybody, but I think it's perfectly fine to go against the societal norms to serve your best interest and move you forward on a personal level. And people will get nervous around that. You start talking about, some of the things I know I talk about with my friends, I could see the nervousness right in their face.
Well, you see it in politics right now with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, the guy is getting followers because he's unpredictable. You never know what the guy is going to say or what's going to fly out of his mouth. He's not like politically correct and reserved like most politicians are. And I think that's enticing for a lot of people, whether, he would be a good president or not. They like something different than the status quo.
Yeah. And I think to add on to what you just said, they respect that. Because he's not, he's bankrolling his own campaign. So he's not vested to personal interests like the career politicians. he doesn't have lobbyists paying him tons of money to say certain things and to pass certain laws. He seems like he's got his money, he's made his money, and he says he wants to make America great again. Gosh, and people can't understand why he's so vastly popular. I can see it. I don't know if I would necessarily vote for him, but I respect that a lot, and I also think that maybe that's what this country needs.
Yeah, you don't know.
Someone who's not going to break the rules. I mean, someone who will break the rules and just say, "You're fired."
I don't know if I trust him, but I do like. I think it is. I think it is a fresh take on. I'm so tired of seeing the same guys up there and the same guys that promise change, and change doesn't come about.
No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. So
unpredictability. I think that's. I think
we should just end this right here.
We're being unpredictable.
That's as unpredictable as you can get. But I don't think we'll do that
Suck
to
it
our
up,
audience.
buttercup.
I don't think we could do that to our audience. But I think we have, beat this dead horse. So we'll be predictable. That's okay, because we're not out to seek power from our audience.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Tom Stewart.
This is John Curren.
See you next time.
Peace.
One-legged ass kicking champion. Ass kickingologist.
Thanks.
Yeah, that came out of nowhere.
Unpredictability.
Thank you for listening to A Swift Kick in the Ass podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's content, and we ask you to please leave us a review in iTunes. Also, head over to aswiftkickingtheass.com to get a free copy of the Simple Spelling Tool.